A widow was mocked for hiding her 2 children in a cave, until the blizzard arrived. The winter had come early that year. The winds carried a biting chill, and the small settlement lay under a thick, unbroken blanket of snow. Smoke curled lazily from the chimneys of the modest wooden houses, and inside, families huddled near the hearth, sharing warmth and stories. Yet for Martha and her 2 children, Emma and Henry, the hearth was a distant dream. Their home was not one of comfort, but of survival. Since the death of her husband, Martha had struggled to provide for her children in a world that seemed determined to test her endurance. Martha had always been a practical woman, known among the villagers for her quiet resilience. But when her husband died unexpectedly, the village's sympathy quickly turned to suspicion. "She'll never manage on her own," whispered the neighbors. "A widow with 2 children cannot survive the winter." Yet Martha ignored the gossip, her only concern being the safety of her children. The village they lived in was small and isolated, nestled between rocky hills and vast expanses of snow-covered plains. The settlement was barely self-sufficient, food was scarce, and a harsh winter could mean disaster. Martha had tried to make their cabin as warm as possible, but the structure was old and leaky, and her resources were limited. It was one evening, as the wind howled outside and the snow began to fall in earnest, that Martha made a decision that would mark her as an outcast in the eyes of the villagers. There was a cave at the edge of the settlement, tucked beneath a rocky outcrop. It had once been a temporary shelter for hunters and trappers, but it had long been abandoned. The cave was dark, but deep enough to shield its inhabitants from the worst of the winter winds. Martha had discovered it months earlier while searching for firewood, and she had kept it in mind as a potential refuge. Now, with the storm approaching, she knew it was the only place her children could be safe. "Mother, it's cold out there," Emma said, her small hands trembling as she clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders. She was only 8, but she understood the dangers that winter could bring. "I know, my love," Martha replied, adjusting the heavy cloak around her own shoulders. "But inside that cave, we'll be warm and safe. Trust me." Her voice was calm, but inside, she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest. The villagers watched from their windows as Martha led her children across the snow-laden field to the cave. They whispered among themselves, their voices dripping with judgment. "She's crazy," said one man, shaking his head. "Who leaves the warmth of a house to hide in a cave like animals?" Another woman muttered, "Her children will freeze, mark my words." Martha ignored them, her focus on the task at hand. She piled logs and brush at the entrance of the cave to create a makeshift barrier against the wind. Inside, she arranged blankets and dried grass to provide insulation, and lit a lantern, its golden light casting long shadows on the stone walls. Emma and Henry huddled close, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. The first night was tense. The wind howled like a living creature outside, and the snow pressed against the cave's entrance in heavy drifts. Martha kept the lantern burning, feeding the fire with small pieces of wood she had gathered, making sure her children stayed warm. They ate sparingly, rations of bread and dried meat, but the cave shielded them from the worst of the storm. As she watched her children sleep, Martha felt a quiet sense of triumph. They were safe, and that was all that mattered. Word of Martha's decision spread quickly through the village. By morning, a group of villagers had gathered at the edge of the snow-covered field, staring in disbelief at the small cave that now housed the widow and her children. "Look at them," one man sneered. "Frozen already, mark my words." The children peeked out from behind their mother, their faces pale but alive, and the villagers' scorn deepened. "Why don't you come back to your cabin?" a woman called out. "It's no place for children." Martha's response was calm but firm. "We are safe here," she said. "When the wind blows like this, the cabin cannot protect us. This cave can." The villagers laughed derisively, shaking their heads. They had never seen someone defy the harsh judgment of winter in such a manner, and to them, Martha's actions were reckless at best, foolish at worst. Days passed, and the storm showed no signs of relenting. Snow piled high against the cave's entrance, and the wind seemed to grow colder with each passing hour. From their homes, the villagers watched, their laughter turning slowly into worry. Their own cabins, built on shaky foundations and with limited supplies, began to creak under the weight of the relentless snow. The blizzard did not spare them, and it became clear that Martha's decision, once mocked, was not without wisdom. Inside the cave, Martha's life had become a routine of vigilance. She melted snow over the small fire to make drinking water, rationed food carefully, and kept her children close to the warmth. Emma learned to wrap herself tightly in blankets, while Henry gathered firewood from the edges of the cave. Despite the harsh conditions, the children were safe, fed, and protected from the storm. Martha found herself marveling at the quiet resilience of her family, and at the strength that hardship had awakened within her own heart. By the 5th day of the blizzard, the village was in crisis. Roofs were collapsing under the weight of snow, food stores were running dangerously low, and the villagers realized that their own survival was far from certain. The widow in the cave, once the subject of ridicule, had demonstrated the foresight and courage that they had lacked. Whispers of respect replaced the earlier scorn. "Perhaps she knew something we didn't," someone murmured. "The cave keeps them safe." When the storm finally began to subside, the villagers approached Martha cautiously. They found her family alive and well, the children bright-eyed and full of energy despite the days spent in near isolation. Martha greeted them with quiet dignity, offering small smiles but no words of reproach. The villagers, ashamed of their earlier mockery, could only stare in astonishment. Martha's courage had not only preserved her children's lives but had also served as a lesson to the entire settlement. In the days that followed, the villagers helped dig out the cave's entrance and provided additional supplies, recognizing the wisdom in Martha's actions. The widow who had been laughed at was now a symbol of strength and resilience, her practical knowledge valued above the idle gossip that had once defined her. Emma and Henry thrived in the aftermath of the storm, their spirits unbroken. They often ventured outside to play in the snow, their laughter echoing across the plains. Martha, once a figure of quiet endurance, had become a leader of sorts, admired for her ability to remain calm under pressure and to make decisions that prioritized life over pride. The cave, once a place of ridicule, was transformed into a symbol of protection, ingenuity, and maternal love. Years later, the story of Martha and her children became a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration in the village. When winter arrived with its usual harshness, families remembered the widow who had braved the storm and protected her children in the most unlikely of shelters. Children were told her story as they learned to respect the elements and the wisdom that comes from experience. Martha's bravery had not only saved lives but had reshaped the community's understanding of survival, courage, and the unyielding bond between a mother and her children. The cave remained a place of legend, a testament to the strength of those who dared to defy convention when it was necessary to protect the ones they loved. And whenever a storm approached, the villagers would think of Martha, the widow who had shown them that sometimes, wisdom is found not in comfort, but in courage, foresight, and a willingness to face the world as it truly is.